Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of ECC Essentials. We have Heather Blaney here today talking about emotional support animals in the center. If you're watching live, feel free to say hello in the chat. Let us know where you're tuning in from, as always. If you're watching the replay or listening, thank you. And I will say, we were talking before we went live on this, and I had so many questions for Heather. Almost lost track of time. So we're going to try to get through as much as we can get through this morning, knowing that this is just a 30-minute session. But as we go through, please don't hesitate to put questions in the chat. I know emotional support animals is a pretty popular topic right now, especially. So with that, I will first have Heather just introduce yourself, introduce your little buddy there, and give us just a brief background.
Hey guys, my name is Heather and I work at Knox County Central Dispatch in Vincennes, Indiana. This is ESA dispatcher Nugget. He's got a county unit number, it's 42PU. Yes, he is absolutely a skunk. Quick answers about him real fast. He was born in May of 2020. He has never been wild. He was born domestically. And no, he cannot spray. He was descented when he was about 2 to 3 weeks old. He does come and hang out with us. Not only in the center, but he comes with us when we do public relation things, when we go out into the community. And this is pretty much what he does with us, except right now he's a little more moving around than normal. So yeah.
It's just excited to talk about this. So first, again, when we were talking before, kind of what we wanted to start with, can you just give a brief insight? Because we hear different terms, right? There's emotional support animals, there's therapy animals, there's service animals, of just kind of how to differentiate between those.
Absolutely. My boss just walked in. Hi, Rob.
Halcyon.
Hold on.
Hello, Rob.
How are
This is
you?
a special appearance by Rob for anyone who might know him.
Okay, so an emotional support animal can actually be classified as any animal. It's not protected under ADA. So emotional support animals cannot go into restaurants. They cannot go any place that animals are not allowed. Emotional support animals, that's all they provide, are emotional support. And again, emotional support animals can be any type of animal that you want. There also is no actual registration for an ESA. Essentially, the reason people have ESAs is it can allow you to have your animal in housing that might not allow animals otherwise. So that's when you might go to a doctor and get a note saying, hey, I need to have my emotional support animal, versus a service animal. So a service animal, there are only two types of animals that are acknowledged under the ADA. And that is going to be a service dog or a service miniature pony. That's it. Service animals do not need to be specially trained by like any kind of registered training facility. With a service animal, the ADA recognizes that the handler can actually train that service animal themselves. There are only two questions that you can legally ask according to the ADA, somebody with a service animal as well. The first question is that a service animal? And of course, if it's a dog or a miniature pony, that'd be the right question to ask. The second is, what service does your animal provide? That's it. You cannot ask any follow-up questions. You cannot ask for proof. There is no national registration or registry for service animals. It is considered discrimination if you continue to ask questions about that service animal. I do go into this a little bit more in my sessions. Off the top of my head, there are two organizations that do not have to follow the ADA national federal law. One is churches, religious organizations, but off the top of my head, I can't remember what the second organization is. So any church can actually say no service animals if they wanted to and have no repercussions from that. Therapy animals, I did look into actually having him registered as a therapy animal. That does take a little bit more in depth. For a therapy animal, you do have to take that animal to different types of classes. And unfortunately, I can't find any in the country that will allow me to try and get a skunk to be a therapy animal. So he is my ESA dispatcher. He is our emotional support animal dispatcher. And that's what that means when I'm traveling around saying, oh, ESA dispatchers. So I hope that answers.
Yes, no, I think that was a good explanation because I think they'll sometimes get muddied. And just really quick, kind of too, for my own, for a service animal, while they don't have to, I believe, as far as I know, there are a lot of places though that you can go get them formally trained. Like even
Yes,
if it's not required, there's still a lot of resources out there. For service.
absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't even know where to begin to train an animal to detect low blood sugar. Absolutely. But the ADA
Right.
does not require that. Yeah.
Yes, I found this so interesting. I think a few other people are like, would also find it super interesting just to know the difference in what's required and not required.
Mhm.
So, and with Rob there, he may be able to comment on this, but when it came, like, when you were looking at bringing Nugget into the center, what did that look like as far as a process? You know, like, I think you guys are county. Was that county had to approve? Just Rob had to approve? Was there any rules you had to follow? Any paperwork that had to be submitted? What did that process look like for you guys?
On my end, it was pretty simple. Other than going and asking all of my partners, hey, do you mind if, is this okay? On my end, all I had to do was come in and ask Rob. And originally it was just going to be a one-time thing. I was probably just my normal hot mess self. And I just remember asking, hey, I'm having a rough time. Can you come in with me? And Rob was like, yeah, that's fine. We can try it. I know we talked about doing pet policies. There was one of my former partners before she left, she did bring her dog in very, very frequently because we worked 12-hour shifts and we were working overnight. She didn't want to leave her dog home. I'm not sure exactly what Rob's process was. I do know that he came to me a little while later when Nugget started coming in regularly. And he said, hey, our county commissioners are completely on board with Nugget coming and hanging out. And since then, we've looked into having the pet policy and we've, liability, who's going to be responsible for what, and that kind of thing.
So do you guys have like a written, like explicit policy on when you bring pets in, the liability of it, the responsibility of it, those types of things?
Here, I think we're pretty lucky where Rob just kind of allows us to bring in our pets as we want, as long as our partners are okay with it. But we did create a pet policy, and that pet policy does go over who's going to be responsible in case of destruction of property, who's going to be responsible if there's ever any injuries. And then talking about, making sure the animals are up to date with all of their shots. I actually make sure when I update my permits, I have to have permits with Indiana Department of Natural Resources with Nugget. I make sure that they are in file here, just in case, because you never know. I have a special education license with the state of Indiana that I have to have with Nugget that allows me to take him out in the public and interact in the public with him because he's considered a wild animal.
It's very wild right now. Yes.
Yeah, he's very wild right now. But I make sure that when I get those updated every year, that I give them to Rob so Rob can put them in my file again, just in case. But that's one thing with pet policies is you want to make sure, or animal policies, that you have copies of vet records, you have copies of behavioral temperament, doing kind of a starting off with just like a temporary coming in for a few hours with the animal to see how it acclimates to the environment as well. We want to make sure, yeah. And then the biggest thing too is make sure that everybody in the center is comfortable with it. So making sure that people feel like they can, whether it's anonymously or not, but go to somebody and make a complaint. I'm really not okay with the fact that there's a skunk here during my shift. And I promise they're not going to want to tell me that to my face. So making sure that there's a way that somebody in your center can anonymously and comfortably go and say, I'm actually not okay with this is a really big, important thing as well.
Yeah, and I think it's tough, like for myself as an animal lover to remember that it's like almost anything else. Not everybody loves them or not everybody loves that animal, and that is okay. As sad as it is for me to think that there's people who don't love dogs and don't like have their own personal emotional support dog at home, it is okay, and so it is okay if somebody is not comfortable because like you said, and I was gonna say you've mentioned it a couple times, which I think is fantastic because it is so important to make sure everybody is on board. And Nikki in the chat said, "And allergies." Again, I would hate to be a person who has allergies for, dogs and cats, but love them because I feel like that would be so tough. And then the other thing, really quickly, uh, is your pet policy something that could be shared?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I can get that however I need to get that to you guys. I have copies of it. And allergies actually can be covered. They actually can be an ADA issue as well. So if somebody
Okay.
in your center has allergies and you're not willing to accommodate or give them a separate space or separate space for the animal they might be allergic to, that could actually be considered discrimination against a disability. I found that out diving into research on the
Yeah.
what abilities were, and that was interesting to me to find that out. And that's one of the reasons he works out so well here. I do have a partner who is highly allergic to cats, and then he has different dander.
Oh.
So which is good because when he's mad at me, that's who he cuddles up to. So that's one of the other things too about diving into other types of animals other than just dogs or cats are allergies. During the Dare to Be Great, that center had Quilly Wonka, the hedgehog. And I thought that, I mean, that's exactly what it is I'm advocating for, like other
Yeah.
types of animals. So yeah.
No, those are all really good points, and I really appreciate you bringing them up because it really is, again, when we love animals, we're like, "This is great, this can be it," but we have to look at the whole picture, and we have to make sure that we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's and including everybody and making sure everybody's on board, um, because even if they are on board, but then they have allergies, like, we can't I mean, they might be just as sad as we are to not be able to have that, but obviously not, their fault to have the allergies. Um There's just so many things. We were talking before, I'm like, so many questions. Uh, one thing I wanted to ask too is, so for like Nugget or the other pets that you have come in, is it like a free range? Are they confined in any way? Is there, at certain points, do they get put in maybe a kennel or something just if there's like a really hot call going on to make sure that nothing is getting affected by that?
So we actually have a very small center. It's kind of up to the pet owner. I know that the dogs that have come in, the people that bring in their dogs, they usually just bring in their dog's bed or maybe just some blankets, and that's pretty much it. With Nugget here, when about the first year I would bring him in, I would bring his kennel, but the door was left open unless he was being obnoxious and still trying to figure out the lay of the land. He likes the trash cans. He likes to dig into the trash cans. And so about a year, I would bring his kennel in. And then just one day, he never went near the kennel. And I was like, well, okay. So I stopped bringing it in, and he's made his little nest areas and other places. Bigger centers, though, you can have certain areas that are going to be absolutely animal free. Animals do not go here. You've got to make sure that you've got a space outside for these animals to go to the bathroom. Nugget here has a bush. Now at home, he doesn't go outside. At home, he uses a litter box, but we're not going to bring a litter box in here. So he trained himself, and I'm just lucky with that. He has a bush outside, right outside our door. So we just take him out. He goes to the bathroom and he comes right back in. But you got to make sure you've got space for these animals if they're not in a cage to go to the bathroom. Who's going to pick up after that? Is it going to be the owner? Is the owner going to allow their animal to stay with other shifts? Nugget here has come in on other shifts, and he's hung out whenever somebody's asked me to. I'm like, yep, absolutely. I'll bring him in and he can hang out with you guys. There's a lot that goes into whether or not you're going to allow animals in your comm center. And it depends again too on the size of your comm center. So.
This is a great question in the chat. Has there ever been an issue, conflict between two people wanting to bring different animals in and them not getting along?
I haven't had that experience here. I've been pretty lucky. Nugget is not a huge fan of dogs, and he makes that very well known to everybody. So when my partner who would bring her dog in, she worked a separate shift than I did. If I knew she was coming in, and I would text her and say, "Hey, I've got Nugget with me today," so she would let me know. I would just make sure that I had Nugget in his crate before he got there, or I would go ahead and take Nugget out to my car, and like he's got his own little seat in my little Mini Cooper, and I would just make sure that we work together on that. So we haven't had an issue here. So if anybody has, I'd love to hear it so that I can, but we haven't had an issue here. We communicate with each other pretty well, especially when it comes to animals. It's very rare that somebody will just, especially with somebody who's bringing in a new animal, like a new dog or something, it's very rare that they just show up. So
Yeah, communication is huge, I think, like you mentioned, just to coordinate that. And just, I'm not a fan of putting everything in policy because I don't think that solves it either. But just something to think about too, to maybe head off something or um, think about, okay, what if two people want to bring animals or, there's an overlapping shift or whatever that looks like. Again, not to put everything in policy, but just maybe stick something in there to kind of help guide that conversation. If somebody's like, well, I want to bring mine in, I want to bring mine in, and what that looks like, I think is helpful as well. Have you had to deal with anyone that has a fear of a certain animal due to a past animal attack or traumatic experience? Or is that something I would think that maybe has been voiced even ahead of time?
yeah, we did have a partner who past partner, she did have a fear of dogs. And our everyone just kind of respected that. When she was working, they didn't bring their dogs in while she was working. And I'm happy that she felt comfortable enough to tell us that she had a fear of dogs.
Yeah.
And nobody's had an issue with him yet, which is a little surprising, I guess.
I was just gonna ask, I was like, so how did she do with skunks?
Yeah, she loved him. He would go over and get into her purse, and she'd hold him, and so
Yeah.
yeah, that's my only experience with somebody who had a fear. I did have a partner. He's part-time. He hasn't been here in a while, and he just doesn't like any animals. None, zero, nada. And if I knew ahead of time he was working, I would not bring Nugget in, but there were a few times. And as much as he does not like animals, I'd be like, hey, I didn't know. I'm sorry. And he's like, no, it's really okay. It doesn't really bother me. I just like giving you a hard time. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Right. But I think that kind of speaks to the relationship and the communication of, instead of it being this like blow up fight, as I think sometimes happens in peace apps on issues, it was like that he could acknowledge that you didn't know, it wasn't intentional, it wasn't malicious, it wasn't, and kind of that meet in the middle. And so but that also made me think too, and I don't want to like, not personally about the former coworker who didn't like dogs, by no means trying to throw them under the bus or something, but was there ever any like issues though with then people who maybe worked with that person regularly who felt like, oh, I can't because of this one person? Not necessarily because they had a problem with her personally, but I think it's easier for us to kind of
Yeah.
develop resentments, when we feel like one person is standing in the way of something.
I didn't see any kind of issues come up. I do know that whenever the person who's afraid of dogs would have a night off, the other partner would bring her dog in. But I didn't see any kind of conflict. I think too, it's a privilege that we're able to bring in our animals here. And I think that we all recognize that that's a major privilege. So I think that's why we're so respectful towards each other, because we don't want Rob to have to come in and say, hey, if you guys can't do this, then I'm not going to allow it. And we all, like, even those who don't bring in their animals, they still, I think, want us to have this option to be able to have our guys in the center. And it's a benefit that not too many other places provide.
Yeah.
It's one of the most amazing things that I love about working here is that I can bring him in, and I can bring in my albino skunk if I want to, or that it's possible. I mean, she no longer works here, but I'd come in the morning and my partner would have this crazy cute ferret just like running around, and it just instant like serotonin. And it's just not, I mean, it's not just Nugget. There was a day I didn't have Nugget here with me, and I'd taken a call that was just, it got to me. And those emotions were flowing through my eyes. And my partner coming in that evening came in with his dog. And as soon as I saw his dog, and his dog came over and put his head on I mean, all of it was like, you know what? I'm okay. I'm not okay, but I'm okay.
It is crazy. Well, and I think that's so huge, and I am glad you touched on that. Like, on one hand, yes, workplaces retention should be doing what they can to help us, have better time at work, if you will. But on the same turn, it is a huge privilege, and I think that it's so important to recognize, like you guys have recognized it. Hey, if we want to get upset and be mad or do whatever, yeah, you can do that, but then here's the cost of it, and then that all of it goes away. And I think that's really, really important to remember is if you want to keep that privilege, you have to, find ways to communicate and get on board with people and work things out.
Yeah, I do see the message about adopting an animal to live in the center full time, and I think that's a great idea. I did go to the Indiana 911 professional last year, and I spoke with a director, and they did that. And he said that unfortunately, their adopted dog got very heavily protective of the people in the center. And I guess this dog bit somebody who was coming in who was not a regular employee. It's something I wouldn't have even thought of.
No.
So if with your policy, you guys, if you adopt an animal that's going to live in the center, that's not going to be a caged animal like a hedgehog or a hamster or something, I would have backups in place just in case something like that happens, or maybe figure out a way where your animal can go outside of the center, maybe kind of like when you were in school and you had classroom pets and on certain weekends or days, just so that animal is not just in the center all the time. That was something I never would have thought of, that an animal would get protective of the center and the people in the center. So I'm glad I had a chance to talk to him and get that experience from him.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, because I can see it though, like, especially if a small room, that's that dog's domain, that's their people. We were talking before, I was like, my dog, when another dog comes around, she literally sits on me, not next to me, not like puts her butt on top of me to make sure that people know. And so I think that's a really good point to bring up for like an adopted like that, to make sure they're still getting like the socialization and not just within that center.
Yeah.
These are good questions. Anything, we have about 5 minutes left. So with that, if you have any questions watching live, feel free to put them in the chat. But other than that, I am actually going to have if you just want to share like some skunk fun facts, kind of the origin story of Nugget, if you will, since we have a few minutes.
So a lot of people do not know that there are fur farms with skunks. And in the 20s and 30s, skunk fur was really big. They made skunk fur coats, but they didn't tell people that it was skunk. In the 40s, there was a federal law that was passed nationally that you had to say what type of pelts were being sold as coats. And wouldn't you know it, as soon as people realized these coats were skunks, they stopped buying them. So these fur farms had to figure out really quick what else they could do. Well, they breed skunks and they sell them to the USDA for lab research. You just never hear it. Nugget was born in 2020, and the same year that he was born at this fur farm, they had 188 skunks that the USDA purchased from the fur farm, and they used them for COVID research. And then, of course, after the research, they destroyed them all. So Nugget right now is definitely living his best life. And we got well, it's not really his brother, but it's his brother, our albino one from the same place. But this fur farm, they use a lot of the different parts of the skunk as well. So their scent glands are actually just two little pea-sized glands. And because the oil, and that's what makes when a skunk sprays you, that's why it doesn't go away, it's coated in oil. They use those in some kinds of perfumes and all kinds of different other things. So
It was like so interesting to me. But yeah, if you can see that, there's a few more questions really quickly. Somebody asked about like the cleanliness of having them. Do you guys have anything within your policy or a separate policy as far as cleaning up, making sure, that everything is not covered in hair and
So
things?
with Nugget, he is completely my responsibility, unless he stays with somebody else. I make sure that he is clean when he comes in. The animals that we do have come in, they all have to, be clean. They have to be taken outside. If you have an animal that stays consistently at your center, whether it's caged or not, you definitely are going to want to have some kind of a system set up, kind of like when you go into a bathroom at a gas station and you can see the last person who cleaned that kind of a system is what you're going to want to do. And it's going to be volunteer based. And you'll quickly see who's willing to volunteer. I actually, for the first year he was here, I brought him out. I just didn't think anyone else would want to. And then I found out that some of my other partners could, just because they liked to get outside, be like, well, do you mind, do you want to take him out, or do you mind taking him out for me? And so you definitely want to make sure that everything is taken care of with cleanliness. And
there's responsibility there.
Yeah. And then the dog going through correct training. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Even, I mean, if you guys can't have an animal full time, there are places that offer therapy animals that maybe you could set something up to where that therapy animal comes in, or maybe somebody else is willing to. Nugget and I, if we're asked to go somewhere, in a heartbeat, I'll go, So you can always reach out and see if there's anyone in your area that offers therapy animal services, and see if they would be willing to either donate their time or something like that. And that might be beneficial too if you have certain people who are like, I don't like animals, I don't want them here. Maybe you can set it up where that therapy animal can come in when that person isn't around, so that they're not affected by it.
Yeah, I think even though, as we talked in the beginning, like training isn't necessarily required, it can be very helpful. And I think, not from experience, this is just kind of my assumption and my thought, but especially if you have maybe people in administration, or you're under a county board or something like that, where you're also trying to, essentially persuade people to get on board. Some type of formal training also might help with that, to show that, hey, they've gone through this, they have the training, we have this documentation, just to kind of, like, as we know, like, build the case, pack the record, if you will, to help support that. Erica commented she's trying to convince her husband that they need a skunk. I feel like there's probably a lot of people after meeting Nugget who are like, I would like a skunk. But we have reached the end of today's episode of ECC Essentials. So if you have any questions or would like a copy of the policy, what's a good email or a place where they can contact you, Heather?
I will go ahead and I will type it in really fast. It's just going to be hvlaney@knoxcounty.in.gov.
Perfect.
And I can get that out to you guys.
Oh. And then in 2 weeks, the 20th is our next episode of ECC Essentials, and we will be talking about navigating bias in training with Josephine Rios, who also does Latinas of 911. And then last question, do you sell the PU42, the Nugget shirts, and where
Yep.
can they find those?
I have it on Bonfire. It is in my LinkedIn. If you find me on LinkedIn, it is in my LinkedIn. I don't know what the thing is right off the top of my head. And I actually will use the proceeds for this to put back into like buying stickers and if I need help with like funds to travel or something. But mostly I've been buying 42 PU stickers with the proceeds from the shirts.
So much good stuff. But look forward to seeing you guys back here in 2 weeks. Thank you so much, Heather and Nugget,
Thank you.
for joining us today. So much good information. If you have any questions, feel free to write to Heather, or if you have any questions about the foundation, ECC Essentials, or potentially want to be a guest, please reach out to me, halcyon@deniseamberly.org. And with that, I will let you guys get back to your day. Hopefully you have a fantastic rest of your Tuesday, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.